All right, huge news on the way from Apple this coming Monday. Finally, there will be a competent AI tool in your pocket. So let's get into it. Monday morning, Apple will push basically to 1 billion phones as default, their brand new AI assistant. Not just an app that you'll choose, basically a default across every single device. The moment someone asks their phone to solve basically something instead of navigating through 5 or 6 different apps. Now that's the promise, basically, that you'll be able to just guide Siri and it will execute for you with a level of smart competence. I think that remains to be seen, but fingers crossed. I mean, that's the promise. And the interesting thing is this is being backed by Google, and also most people won't notice it. So you're a step ahead by knowing this news. Now, basically, obviously, you're not most people. That's why you're consuming AI news. In the next 48 hours, you also understand what just broke at the company building Claude and why your job is heading in the same direction. You're going to know where the money's actually moving while everyone else is still arguing about which AI startup wins in the massive IPO race. So that's the edge. Let's build on it. Let's keep moving forward. All right, so what's the main news at the moment? So coming Monday, like I said, Apple, the default moment. The keynote is Monday, 10 a.m. PST, 6 p.m. UK, if you're looking for the highlights. Although, does anyone still do that? I think that was a big thing when Steve Jobs was around. Anyway, Siri gets a rebuild, conversational, able to actually execute tasks across your apps instead of just setting timers. I think it'll be pretty funny to see the ideas that people come up with if that's genuinely the case. So reportedly running on a custom Gemini Google model, with Apple paying Google a cool $1 billion a year for the usage. So why does this matter? Well, basically, as the assistant becomes the default layer, you don't choose to use it. It's the fundamental. It's the first thing you interact with. So when that hits 1 billion people, the conversation about how people find answers, how they use apps, how they solve problems, it changes entirely. So if you're running anything like a service, a product, a business, a personal brand, your job just shifted into how do I be the answer the assistant best gives, or how can I kind of prompt it with the best questions or statements to actually get it to do things. And I'll come back to why this is important, but it's all about time. So let's circle back to the time piece in a while, but let's keep moving through what's cooking in the broader news. So let's zoom out to the kind of the macro stuff now, because arguably the Apple news is macro, but it's also a tool for, the vast majority. Not necessarily actually, but a lot of people are using iPhones, or at least interact with it in some way. So what just happened at Anthropic? So last month, basically, Anthropic filed confidentially this week to go public, reportedly targeting late this year for their IPO. OpenAI, same window, supposedly Q4. The chip maker Cerebras already listed this month and hit close to 100 billion valuation on day one. So the translation is basically frontier labs are moving from private and experimental to public and accountable. That means real pressure to deliver, which leads directly to the kind of career talk that we'll have. So, basically the take here is that the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic that have been obviously growing at insane rates over the last 4 to 5 years, but they've always been kind of over there. The whole topic of AI has kind of been over there for most people. It's in your wider awareness, but like not top of mind. It's not your traditional tech, like your Microsofts, your Google, your Amazon. And I mean from both like an awareness standpoint of like global tech and what's moving the world these days commercially, and also just in terms of our own usage. Like we're probably, for most people, you're probably using more like Microsoft and Google tools for the last 2, 3, 4 years than you would have been using OpenAI tools, for example, ChatGPT, or using Anthropic Claude tools. So that is all shifting now. These players have they're now rising up to the kind of the top tier of the table. It reminds me of, is it the Godfather movie, when they get together all of the top brass from the mafia across all the top cities? I mean, you can see how Anthropic and OpenAI have clearly stepped into the room with Google, Microsoft, and others. So basically what happened at Anthropic is last month, the most advanced AI lab on earth published numbers about itself. This is fascinating. And this is so vital to understand. This is vital to all of us to basically become the orchestrator. So bear with me here while I kind of elaborate. So AI now writes most of the code for Anthropic. The engineers moved to directing and reviewing instead of actually bursting out code. So output per engineer jumped by 8 times, not 8%. 8 times, unbelievable. And here's why that matters. That's basically happening right now inside also of Google, Microsoft, Meta, and it's coming everywhere. So the goal here you can see is that, like, you can look at the engineers and take the kind of analogy and example from them. They're no longer doing the thing. They understand how to direct the machine to do the thing. So that's now so vital, to understand all of the machines or tools at your disposal but make sure you know how to direct them, because that's how you become essentially invaluable. So while your job is heading in a certain direction, this is for everybody. So the question isn't, will AI change my job? It's, am I the right person, or am I the person directing AI, or am I being replaced by it? Basically, that's the big question. So are you the person who can orchestrate AI? So I think the big thing around this is, let's take it from two standpoints. If you're employed or if you're self-employed, arguably both are the exact same thing. Just think of one task that you're repetitively doing, or even just one task that you need to get through. You've got some dirty spreadsheet you need to review. It's got stuff all over the place. You've got, 1,000 different pieces of information you need to synthesize, whatever it is. But take one simple task and just push it through an AI tool today. It doesn't even need to be massively complex. It can be pretty simple. Maybe you have a reference letter you need to write for somebody. Maybe you have to, respond to 20 emails. You could just take screenshots of it, shoot a voice note in, and then respond. A big thing as well, I would strongly encourage, whenever you're using AI tools, use voice. Like, again, it saves you time from typing. It saves you the energy of needing to type. Like, use your voice for speed wherever possible. So again, the things I've touched on today are speed and time. And I'll kind of loop back on this, because it's super important in terms of like your macro and your micro. Macro in terms of understanding where the AI world is going, but also just you in terms of your own personal time and how you can best get value from AI. So try do some task today. You'll be super happy. 1% a day. That's the ethos here. All right. So as part of the kind of AI movement, one thing I think is really important to keep an eye on as well is like where the big bucks are moving, where the finance is moving. So, you could potentially take advantage of this as well. And again, this is not financial advice by any stretch, but if you ever dabble in the stock market, there's some kind of interesting things to think about here. So this is also important, even if you're not interested in investment. But you must understand, we all must understand, myself very much top of the list here, to understand the infrastructure that's part of AI. Like, it's not appropriate now to consider oneself AI literate and just think that, like, I've got ChatGPT on my Android or on my iOS, and I can ask it a question about, tell me the time zone in Indonesia versus Chicago. Like, having a clever person on demand is not good use of AI, and it doesn't actually help you understand AI. We have to understand the strata, or the layers, shall we say, that actually fundamentally power this incredible life-changing machine that is kind of frighteningly developing in front of us. And that's the thing here. We don't have time to waste. So let's get into it. We've got the picks and shovel thesis. So in the gold rush, the steady money was selling the shovels, as we know. In AI, the shovels are the chips, the data centers, and the raw power, or the electricity. Okay, so the picks and shovel thesis. Shall we jump into it? Let's go. Okay, the chips. Every model runs on specialized processors. We've got, most of us are aware of NVIDIA. That's obvious, but it's already from let's say an investment standpoint, it's been run pretty hard already. So many investors take the trend through semiconductor ETFs, which is a good way to get kind of a broad exposure, spread the bet across a whole chain instead of one stock. So again, I'm talking about this from two standpoints. One is understand that the chips are a huge part of this AI business. Think about that as well, make it resonate, make sure it resonates with you, but then think about it as well from a potential investment standpoint. Is it worth you dabbling a couple of dollars into an ETF that is spread across chips? Quite likely, possibly an interesting one. Next up is the power. The AI data centers need staggering amounts of electricity. The biggest tech companies will spend over $500 billion on data centers in 2026 alone. That demand flows to utilities. Then we've got names that, frankly, I'd never come across, like Constellation Energy and Vistra. They get real attention, and increasingly to nuclear because of the cost involved with the electricity side of it. So the second order play here, less obvious, but directly tied to the build out. An interesting one on this that I mentioned the other day is I listened to an interview with Elon Musk, who I've never actually really, transparently speaking, I haven't listened to much from him over the last couple of years. I kind of probably just fallen into the trap that this is a kind of a caricature as such. But it was an interesting conversation. It was with the Irish guy, John Collison, founder of Stripe, along him and his brother, Patrick. And super interesting interview where basically Musk spoke at length about how the future of energy for AI is from space. It's from solar panels in space, and fascinatingly broke it down how it's actually dramatically cheaper to do it in space, much less, paperwork. Also, candidly, less litigious, no planning, all that sort of stuff. You don't need planning permission from the local council to lay out 10,000 solar panels. And also just the aspect of gravity, which, I'd never thought about, the fact that often the The panels don't need to be as well built, and also the fact that there is no day and night, and there's no climate, there's no rain, there's no cloud, there's no nighttime up in space. It's just kind of a crazy concept that apparently the next 30 months a lot of this energy is going to come from space. So really wild stuff to keep our eyes on. Okay, speaking of kind of physical items, let's keep moving forward into the physical stack. So we've got cooling systems, we've got networking gear, we've got data center real estate. So we've got companies like Vertiv, for example, that are in the power and cooling space. And then we've got these overall are essentially less hype than chips, but there's still huge exposure. And it's often these quiet, boring, unsexy aspects of a wider industry that are really worth kind of delving into. So again, if you're looking at this from an investment standpoint, possibly one to very much consider, but overall just vital that you understand it from an infrastructure standpoint and what's powering this life-changing machine that's in your pocket on your phone. Now we've got the IPOs on deck that we're all aware of. So we've got Anthropic, we've got OpenAI, we've got SpaceX. They're all heading to market this year. So you can't buy them on private. Watch and ask if the valuations make sense. The one question that matters is, and even Fidelity, the massive financial firm, framed this in 2026, like, will the eventual profits justify the cost of these build outs? The translation is a lot of the future success might be priced into these stocks. Basically, again, if you're looking at this from a stock standpoint, the infrastructure is being built. The question is whether it makes money or whether it's a beautiful kind of expensive experiment. Speaking of expensive experiments, it's crazy to think about a lot of the kind of metaverse stuff that was blowing up 3 years ago. I mean, there was a lot of hype that we'd all be sitting in rooms with these kind of meta goggles on, an empty room, but living in paradise. Turned out to be, total bullshit, frankly. And good to hear that, good to see that people still want kind of real human touch. And I'll come back to that as part of the time and speed thing that we've been touching on. So, really, let's recap just to make sure we all understand the different aspects that are involved. And there's, of course, many other aspects to the delivery of this incredible, cash generating tool in your pocket, let's say. And I mean that from the career standpoint or from the, entrepreneurial standpoint. But ultimately, we've got the chips, we've got the power, we've got the physical layer, like the cooling systems, etc. And then we've got obviously the actual companies behind it, like the ones who pull this all together, like the Anthropics, like the OpenAI, etc. So really fascinating to understand all the different layers. Now, why do I mention kind of a couple of times the speed, the time, and possibly, the impact that it has on all of us? Well, ultimately, the big thing, I think, try to take advantage of this and to look at it from all sides. Okay, AI in general, there's no choice anymore. Like, we have to stick with it. We have to learn it. It's just not plausible anymore to put our heads in the sand and not think that this is happening. It's like the year 1998 or 2002, whatever, and thinking that the internet wasn't going to happen, trying to stick, or let's say kind of year 2000, for example, and thinking the internet wasn't going to really, grow exponentially, that the crescendo wasn't en route. It's here, it's happening. It's already happened, arguably, for AI. But for the most part, so many people are kind of, I guess, blind to it, or maybe have the head in the sand. So the first thing is we need, there's no time to waste. We have to every single day put in a, couple of minutes of learning on AI to stay relevant. The next thing basically is then pivot on, that's kind of the worrying side, let's say. Then pivot on the positive side. Like, what can we do? Why is AI so important to you and I? Well, it's because it is ultimately a time thing. So whether it means that in an hour of work, for example, you can be like the Anthropic engineers and get 8 times the work done if you actually know how to do these things. So, perhaps you envisage working the same, working week, whatever that is for you, whether it's 60 hours, 80 hours, 20 hours, whatever it is. Everyone's different these days. But whatever that period of time that you're working is, arguably you can get dramatically, I was going to say drastically and drastically more work done within that time period. And in addition to that, from a time and lifetime standpoint, you can actually probably carve back a huge amount of freedom. I mean, there's a lot of talk these days about the 4-day working week is very plausible because of AI and, the universal salary stuff. And there's a whole world around that. But think about AI from a standpoint of like, how can I get more done per hour so I can get back out and do the things I actually like doing, whether that's out swimming in the sea or hiking a mountain or being with your family or playing sport or walking your dog or whatever the hell it is, go for it. But think about how you can kind of proactively, dare I say, aggressively put time into learning, just with a couple of minutes a day. It's more about the habit rather than putting in like big deep dive 6-hour sessions. That's not really the best way to do this. Tiny micro habits, 1% a day, just learn a little bit more about this, but remember why you're doing it. Don't get lost into, Jesus, I just have to do this because it feels right to do right now. It's not. It's worth doing because you can save back this time and then therefore spend it on things that you actually like doing. So think of it from a speed and time standpoint, which are, universally interlinked. One is every minute of work you are doing, you can move at more speed. You can do more. You can get more from that minute. You can squeeze more out of it. And then secondly, you can contract down, the time that you're working overall and squeeze it into a tighter block if you know how to use these tools, and then get back out and free yourself. And oftentimes just by kind of being strict with the time limiting in terms of whether it's task execution or even just your learning of AI, like don't leave it open-ended. Try to give yourself a frame, and then therefore you'll force yourself with that positive constriction to think creatively, to use these tools to get the job done that you need. But we can't even get to that stage. And for sure, I'm not pontificating because I'm very much in the learning curve as well, but none of us can get to that stage of using the tools correctly to actually achieve what we need to do without dabbling in them every single day for a couple of minutes, just to make sure that we know them and understand them, and therefore know whether you're picking up a hammer, whether you're picking up, a spanner, to basically get the correct job